Hello and welcome to the YouTube series of videos that will be helping you learn this topic. So, Intro to Psych is all about research methods in science topics, and most of the terms you should hopefully already know based on your science experience at school. But this is applying it to psychology. So you'll find all of the resources in the Google Drive under Intro to Psych. And this is the one labelled 1, Methods of Assessing Data. You'll also find the exam questions that we're going to use to apply to that there too. So today we're doing methods of assessing psychological responses, and these are the things inside of the experiments and how we collect the responses. So there's the overarching investigation design, and then there is the methods of assessing that, and that's how we collect it. So for example, doing surveys and that kind of thing. So we're going to touch on a few different things in this lesson, and we're going to mostly focus on the research design. It's not going to be a long one, but it's important that you understand it. So it's about collecting the data from participants, and it becomes the evidence that we're relying on to draw conclusions. So there are 4 terms that you need to remember, and if you understand those 4 terms, then you're going to be fine for this part of it. There's lots of other terms that you're going to stop throwing things at me. Then you're going to understand it properly. So the first term is quantitative. Quantitative is easy to remember if you remember that the N in quantitative is numerical. So anything that is quantitative is involving numbers. So your weight is quantitative, your height is quantitative, your heart rate is quantitative, because that is numerical data. The other term is qualitative, and that again is easy to remember because of the L, which is language. So me talking to you right now is qualitative language. Answers to a survey, a focus group, any kind of discussion is qualitative. So quantitative, counting the amount of times that a baby smiles, is quantitative language, and qualitative, an interview, is qualitative. The other 2 terms are objective and subjective. So objective data is observable data. I keep forgetting that there are other slides here. So it's based on the quantitative measurements of a participant's response that can be directly observed and verified by the researcher. So objective data can only be observable based on this one. So for going back to the baby smiles, it's physical, it's real, and it can be demonstrated. So it's free from bias from the researcher, mostly. It's observable, objective, observable. So counting the amount of times a baby smiles is objective, it's observable, it can be verified by others. It's not necessarily a smile, it could be them just having gas, but that could be a disadvantage of that. So objective is something that the participant doesn't have to do themselves, and that's an easier way to remember it. So objective, observable, the participant doesn't actually have to do anything. So counting the smiles, giving their heart rate, that kind of thing, they don't have to actually do anything themselves, which makes it objective data. On the other hand, subjective data is based on self-reports. So the participant does do something themselves. It's based on self-reports. It could be verbal, it could be written, it could be visual, and it's provided by them. It could be anything from thoughts, about their feelings. It could be about their behaviour that we can't observe, so something that we can't see, for example, their drug use, or their criminal behaviour. So it's coming directly from that participant. So the clinical interview is a subjective measure because the participant is giving their personal opinions. Okay, so there's the 4 terms that you need to remember. Those 4 terms are then put together to make it even more difficult, but if you do remember them individually and by themselves, then it'll make it easier to remember when they're put together. So remember, there's quantitative, which is numerical, qualitative, which is language, subjective, which is from the participant themselves, their self, and objective, which is observable and they don't have to do anything. So the first one that I want you to remember is objective quantitative. And objective quantitative, again, is observable and it's numerical. So standardized tests, IQ tests, while yes, the participant does do it themselves, the data is analysed and it's thought of from other people. So it makes it objective quantitative. Physiological measures like the heart rate, the weight, the height, blood pressure, those kinds of things are objective quantitative, and behaviour counts. But again, not all of these are going to be reliable. We can't have objective qualitative because obviously in order for something to be qualitative it needs to come from someone, and it means that it can't be objective because you kind of need someone to be able to answer qualitative data. Which leaves the other 2, subjective quantitative, so from the self, from the participant, and numerical. So questionnaires with rating scale items, their attitude tests, personality tests, or you could have, like, for example, after an operation, when the doctor is asking you on a scale of 1 to 10, how much pain are you feeling? Anything that is a response that is numerical. And the third one is the subjective qualitative, which is the same. So the self, the subject, the participant is qualitatively responding. So using language, which is a questionnaire with open-ended items, verbal free responses, discussions, focus groups and interviews. Visual responses are included in this, so pictures drawn by children are taken in as data as well. So anything that comes from the participant themselves that is qualitative. So just to go back over those, you've got quantitative data, so remember quantitative is numbers. You've got qualitative data, qualitative is language. Objective data, which is observable, it doesn't have to come from anyone. You can collect it without a participant knowing that they're doing the thing. And subjective, which is a self-report, so coming from the participant themselves. And then we join them together for those 3. But remember them separately and you'll be fine. So the data is then organised and summarised and it's interpreted in 2 different ways. So if it's quantitative data, then we calculate the mean, the median, the standard deviation, and we come up with a correlation there. And if it's qualitative data, we collect it and do a content analysis, but we're going to discuss those further on later. So sample size and representativeness. So when it comes to who is doing the research, the population refers to the entire group of research interests. So for example, if I'm doing a research on year 12s and the effect on caffeine on exam performance, for example, my population would be year 12s, not necessarily just the people that I get it from. It could be year 12s in Asia, it could be year 12s in Africa, year 12s all around Australia. They are my population. So the population is whoever, and if you don't specify that, then your population is everyone. The sample then is the people that you're actually doing your research on, so the participants that are taking part in the study themselves. So your population is the wider population, your sample is who you're doing your research on. So we need to make sure that they are representative of your entire population. So if I'm doing year 12s everywhere, then I need to make sure that I'm including an even amount of females, an even amount of males, a wide cultural balance, a wide religion balance. I need to make sure that I am representative of everyone in that population. And I need to make sure that it's big enough to be able to apply it as well. So if I'm applying it all over the world, for example, I'm going to need more than just the 24 people in our class. So here's another example. So the target population is all child care workers. The sampling population is the total child care workers from 20 different childcare centres, and my sample would be the 20 different childcare centres in that. The most common and the easiest way to be able to get that representativeness is through random selection of our participants. So we need to be able to, I don't know, have 12 different high schools and randomly select people from those high schools to get our representativeness. If we have sample error, then it means that it doesn't mirror the population and that our research isn't going to represent everything. I'm going to skip over this stuff because we're going to cover it later on. So the main thing that I want you to get out of today's lesson is the 3 different methods of assessing data. So remember the 4 terms: qualitative, quantitative, subjective and objective, and remember the 3 ways that we can put them together. So objective, quantitative, subjective, quantitative and subjective, qualitative. So you will be going over some exam questions. Some of these you're not going to be able to do. Don't stress out. If you have done psych before and you feel like you can answer them, then go ahead and try. So your first question is, does doctors that are at a hospital are interested in the emotional experience of their patients? Describe one subjective quantitative method of assessing these emotional responses. And the fourth question you definitely can answer. So a group of psychologists is researching stress levels in factory workers. They intend to use an objective quantitative measure. State the name of one objective quantitative measure that the psychologist could use to measure the workers' stress levels. So using the knowledge that you have just learned, have a go at those at least 2 questions, and we'll be going over those in the next lesson.